the lecture hall, the Galactic Academy stood high above the clouds of Virelia Prime. A world of light and knowledge. Thousands of young cadets from every known species filled the halls, each one eager to prove their worth. They came from peaceful worlds and battle-scarred empires, all united under one symbol, the pursuit of understanding. And today, they gathered in the great lecture hall for one of the most anticipated classes of the year. The hall itself was massive, built with crystal walls that shimmered with starlight. Rows of students sat in curved tiers, their eyes glowing, their scales fur, and skin reflecting the colors of 100 worlds. At the center stood Professor Zelyar, one of the oldest and most respected alien historians in the galaxy. His long silver tendrils swayed as he moved, his golden eyes calm, proud, and full of self-assurance. He began his lecture with his usual smooth voice. "Today, my young scholars," he said, "we discuss one of the rarest events in galactic history, extinction." The audience leaned forward, their translator devices humming softly. "Extinction," Zelyar continued, "is a theoretical endpoint, the total loss of a species, a tragedy so uncommon that only primitive civilizations have ever truly faced it." Soft laughter rippled through the crowd. He smiled, enjoying the reaction. "To think," he said, "that entire species once vanished because they could not adapt. How inefficient, how fragile." He waved his hand and a hologram appeared. Ancient planets turned to dust, ruins lost to time. "Of course," he said, "none of you have anything to fear. Such events are relics of the past. The galaxy today is enlightened, stable, and eternal." The cadets nodded, their faces full of youthful confidence. Then, with a gleam in his eye, the professor added, "Even the old stories of humans and their self-destruction, fascinating but exaggerated. Extinction is not a natural condition for intelligent life." The students laughed again. One cadet, a tall reptilian, raised his claws and said, "Professor, is it true that humans once destroyed their own world?" Zelyar chuckled softly. "Ah, yes, humanity. The only species foolish enough to nearly wipe itself out. But even they survived in small numbers before disappearing into legend." The laughter grew louder, echoing across the vast hall. Only one student didn't laugh. He sat in the last row, quiet, unmoving. His uniform dark gray with a small silver insignia, the symbol of old Earth. His name was Cadet Orion, one of the few humans to ever attend the Galactic Academy. His brown eyes watched the professor without emotion, his jaw tight, his hands resting calmly on his desk. When the laughter began to fade, the professor noticed him. "Ah, yes," Zelyar said with a mocking smile. "Our very own representative of the so-called extinct race." All eyes turned to the human cadet. "Tell me, young man," the professor said, his tone almost playful, "does your kind still believe extinction to be common?" Orion stood slowly, his chair scraping against the floor. He didn't raise his voice, he didn't glare. He simply looked at the professor and said, "For us, Professor, extinction isn't theory." The room went silent. Even the hum of the translator devices seemed to fade. The alien cadets looked at each other nervously, unsure whether he was joking or serious. Professor Zelyar tilted his head, amused. "Oh?" "To explain, Cadet Orion." Orion stepped forward, his boots echoing softly on the crystal floor. He looked around at the sea of alien faces, young, proud, untouched by real fear. "You speak of extinction as if it is rare," he said quietly. "For humanity, it's a memory." The words hung in the air like a storm about to break. The professor raised an eyebrow. "A memory?" Orion nodded. "Yes, sir, we've faced it more times than any species in your archives." He walked closer to the central holo display, touching it to change the images in place of the professor's peaceful charts. The screen now showed fire, destruction, and ruin, Earth's surface burning under mushroom clouds, frozen wastelands, crumbled cities under alien skies. "We've ended our own world more than once," he said, his tone calm. "And yet, here we are." The alien cadets stared in disbelief. One whispered, "That can't be true." Orion turned toward the voice. "You study extinction like it's an idea, a myth," he said. "But for us, it's part of who we are." He looked back at the professor, who now seemed less amused. "We were born on a death world, raised by storms, tested by wars, starved, frozen, and burned, again and again." The room was still, the weight of his words pressing on everyone present. The professor tried to recover, forcing a small laugh. You speak dramatically, young man. Surely your people learned to avoid such ruin. Orion's eyes darkened. We learned to endure it, he said. And we learned that survival has a price. Extinction takes everything. But it teaches everything too. He turned the display again, showing human explorers leaving a ruined Earth, spreading across the stars. For every 99 who fell, one stood up again, he said softly, and that one was enough. No one laughed now. The alien cadets sat frozen, their eyes wide. Professor Zellier's expression shifted from pride to something else. Discomfort. Maybe fear. Orion returned to his seat slowly, his last words echoing through the hall. You call extinction rare because you've never survived it, he said. We call it life. The silence that followed was heavy and endless. Even the air felt different for the first time. The alien students saw humanity not as a relic, but as something ancient, dangerous, and unbroken. Professor Zellier said nothing more that day. The lecture ended early, and the cadets left in silence, their laughter gone, replaced by thought. And in the back of the hall, the human cadet sat alone, looking out the window at the stars, his reflection faint in the glass. His eyes calm but burning with something deeper, a quiet truth that no one else could understand. Extinction was not the end for humanity. It was the reason they began again, the forgotten history the next day. The great lecture hall was quiet. The usual chatter and laughter were gone, replaced by whispers that carried across the corridors. Every student in the academy had heard what happened. The human cadet's words had spread faster than light. Some said he insulted the professor. Others said he revealed something forbidden, but one thing was certain. No one looked at Cadet Orion the same way again. When Professor Zellier entered the hall, the students fell silent. His golden eyes scanned the room before stopping on the human. Cadet Orion, he said in a low, measured voice, since you claim experience in extinction, perhaps you would like to educate the class. There was a faint edge of mockery in his tone, but also a hint of unease. Orion stood, calm and unshaken. Yes, Professor, he said simply. The professor gestured toward the central hollow stage. Then please. Orion stepped forward and the lights dimmed. A faint hum filled the air as he activated the display. A series of images appeared. A blue planet, oceans shining, clouds swirling over green lands. This, he said, was Earth, our home. The alien cadets leaned forward, their eyes wide. It was beautiful once, Orion continued. But beauty never saved anyone. He touched the control panel, and the hollow changed, the sky burned, the oceans boiled, cities crumbled under fire. The first collapse, he said. Our wars ended the world. His voice stayed calm, but his eyes carried the weight of 1,000 ghosts. We destroyed everything, our cities, our history, our hope, but not our will. He moved to the next image, a frozen wasteland. Humans huddled in shelters beneath the ice. This was the second fall, he said. When the sun was hidden for 50 years after the great winters came, our kind almost starved. A small murmur moved through the audience, disbelief mixed with horror. But we adapted, Orion continued. We learned to eat what we could, build from what we had, and never stop breathing. The professor frowned slightly. And yet you call this survival? Orion looked at him, his expression unreadable. Survival is not comfort. Professor, he said, it's refusing to die, even when the universe tells you to. He turned back to the hollow, and this time the image showed great towers reaching to the stars. The third era, we rose again, he said. We rebuilt from ash, we touched the stars, and we thought we had conquered everything. The professor nodded slightly. Progress, he said, so the cycle ends. Orion smiled faintly. No, he said quietly. It never ends. The hollow shifted again. The towers fell. Skies cracked with storms of red. Our arrogance burned us again, Orion said. We built weapons that made gods tremble, and when we used them, the world ended for the second time. The class sat frozen, their translator devices buzzing softly in the silence. We wiped out nearly all life. 99% of our species gone, he said. And still the 1% rebuilt. He looked around the room, his voice steady and cold. You speak of extinction as theory. For us, it's a chapter heading. The professor crossed his arms, trying to hide his discomfort. And what of mercy? He asked, did you never learn peace? Orion tilted his head slightly. Peace? He said softly. Peace was something we earned, not something given. It was built on the bones of everything we lost. He touched the hollow again, and new images appeared. Human ships sailing across stars, small outposts on alien worlds. When Earth was gone, we carried her with us, he said, in our blood, in our memories. The hollow zoomed in on one of the ships, TSS Horizon, a small colony vessel. These were the new humans, Orion said, the ones who refused to let extinction be the end of the story. The professor stepped forward, curiosity beginning to replace arrogance. Tell me, Cadet Orion, he said carefully, why share this history now? Why reveal what your kind chose to bury? Orion paused for a moment, his gaze distant. Because the galaxy has forgotten what it means to struggle, he said quietly. You have comfort, unity, and endless time, but you've forgotten the fire that keeps life alive. He looked around the room, meeting the eyes of every alien cadet. One day, something will come for all of you, he said. And when it does, your books and theories won't save you. Only the will to fight will. The room went still again. Even Professor Zelyar said nothing, his golden eyes thoughtful now. Not mocking, Orion deactivated the hollow, leaving the room in soft blue light. He turned to leave but stopped at the door. My ancestors used to say something, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Extinction is the universe's test. Pass it, and you earn the right to exist. The door slid open, and Orion stepped into the hallway, disappearing into the crowd of silent cadets. Behind him, the professor stood motionless. Staring at the empty hollow stage, he realized that the lecture had changed, not just in content but in meaning. For the first time in centuries, the professor felt something unfamiliar, doubt. As the lights brightened again, the alien cadets whispered among themselves. They no longer laughed at the word extinction. They no longer saw humanity as primitive. They saw something far more terrifying, a species that refused to die no matter the cost, and in that moment, the galaxy remembered why humans were once feared, not because of their strength, but because they had mastered the one thing no other race dared face, the end, the memory of fire when dawn came to Virelia Prime. The academy was still buzzing with quiet talk. The alien cadets could not stop thinking about the humans' words. Even the professors whispered among themselves, wondering if the story was true. No species could fall that many times and still exist, they told each other. It was impossible. But deep in the training sector, inside an old archive chamber, Cadet Orion stood alone. The room was small, built long before the modern halls of crystal and gold. Its walls were made of dark alloy, its lights dim. Here the academy kept relics of extinct civilizations, a museum of loss. Orion entered slowly, his footsteps echoing softly. He moved toward a sealed terminal marked Human Archive, classified. The dust had not been disturbed in centuries. He placed his hand on the scanner, and the machine woke with a low hum. Blue light wrapped around his fingers, reading a genetic code the galaxy thought was extinct. Identity confirmed, the terminal whispered. Access granted. The holographic screens flickered to life, projecting images of old Earth, green fields, deep oceans, cities glittering under a blue sky, and then fire. Mushroom clouds blooming like nightmares, continents burning, billions dying in silence. Orion watched without blinking, his eyes reflecting the flames. Behind him, the door slid open. Professor Zelyar stood at the entrance, his long tendrils trembling. He had followed the cadet here, driven by something he didn't understand, curiosity, fear, maybe even guilt. What are you doing here, Cadet Orion? He asked quietly. Orion didn't turn. Showing you what extinction looks like, he said. The professor stepped closer, his golden eyes widening as he saw the images. Cities falling, oceans turning red, the sky cracking apart. He whispered, This cannot be real. Orion finally faced him. It's real, he said. Every moment of it. He touched the console again, and new footage appeared. Humans digging shelters, building machines, helping one another in the ruins. For every fire we started, Orion said softly, we built something new from the ashes. The professor's voice shook. But why record this? Why keep such pain? Because forgetting is the first step to extinction, Orion replied. He opened another file, showing the rise of the first space colonies, rust-colored ships crawling away from a dying planet, carrying humanity's last hope. We left Earth not as conquerors but as survivors, he said. We carried our mistakes with us so we'd never repeat them. Zellier stared at the projection. One clip showed a human child handing bread to a stranger in a ruined city. Another showed soldiers refusing to abandon the wounded during a storm of ash. Even when we burned everything, Orion said, we never stopped protecting one another. The professor's throat tightened. And yet you call yourselves cursed. Orion shook his head. No, Professor, we call ourselves prepared. The archive changed again, now displaying a map of the galaxy with countless red dots, each one a world where humans had fallen and risen again. We spread like fire, Orion said, not because we wanted to rule, but because staying in one place meant dying. The professor whispered, You made extinction your teacher. Orion nodded slowly. Exactly. A long silence filled the chamber, broken only by the hum of the old machines. Then the professor asked the question that had haunted him since the lecture. If you have suffered so much, why join us? Why come to this academy of those who mocked your pain? Orion looked at him for a long moment before answering. Because knowledge is power, he said, and because the next extinction might not be ours. The professor frowned. You believe it will come again? It always does, Orion said, but this time, we won't face it alone. He gestured at the archive. Every lesson here was written in blood, and if the galaxy is wise, it will read before it burns. Zellier stood still, his mind spinning. He had studied history his entire life, but he had never felt it. Never smelled the smoke of ruined worlds or heard the screams of survival. Now, looking at the human beside him, he realized the difference. Humans did not study history, and they were history. The professor whispered, You carry the memory of fire. Orion nodded, and fire remembers everyone who touched it. Outside, the academy bell chimed, signaling the next session. But the professor didn't move. He simply watched the final hologram, the image of Earth. Reborn blue once more, Orion turned off the console and said, One day, Professor, you'll understand why we never laugh about extinction. As he left the room, Zellier remained behind, staring at the dark screen. He finally understood the truth that every alien scholar had missed. Humanity's greatest strength was not intelligence or power. It was memory. They remembered every loss, every death, every fire, and they used that memory to rise again. That night, Professor Zellier did not sleep. He kept seeing the faces of the humans in the old recordings, men and women who looked at the end of their world and refused to kneel, and in his mind one thought echoed again and again. If extinction could not stop them, what could? The professor's challenge. The Galactic Academy was never quiet anymore. Everywhere Cadet Orion went, eyes followed him. Whispers trailed behind him like shadows. Some cadets stared in awe, others in fear, some with quiet respect. The story of the human extinction boy had spread to every corner of the campus. No one laughed about humanity anymore. But many now asked a different question. If humans survived everything, what wouldn't they survive? Professor Zellier stood before his reflection in the glass window of his private office. He had not been the same since the archive incident. He still saw the faces of the burning world, still heard the calm voice of the human who had lived through the history of his own extinction, and it unsettled him because deep in his heart, buried beneath pride and reason, he felt something dangerous, doubt. That morning, the great lecture hall filled again. The lights dimmed, the air thick with curiosity. Today, the lesson was not about history or evolution. It was about fear, though no one said the word out loud. When Professor Zellier entered, the crowd fell silent. He walked slowly to the center, his long robes dragging across the smooth floor. Today, he said, his golden eyes sweeping across the room, we will discuss the cost of survival. His voice was calm, but his tone was sharp, cutting through the silence like a blade. His gaze stopped on Orion, sitting in the same seat as before. Cadet Orion, he said, would you care to join us? Oh. Orion stood, steady and unflinching. He walked to the front as the crowd shifted uncomfortably. Zellier gestured to him. You have spoken of your people's resilience, he said, of surviving what no one else could. The professor paused. But I must ask, did survival make you stronger or simply more dangerous? A low murmur spread through the room. Orion met his gaze, his face unreadable. Explain, he said. Zellier folded his hands behind his back. You say extinction was your teacher, yet your history is written in blood. Your survival bought with fire and ruin. He stepped closer, his voice rising slightly. How many civilizations fell because humanity could not stop fighting, could not stop destroying? The room tensed. Orion stood silent, his expression calm. Perhaps, Zelyar continued, the reason your species endures is not courage but obsession. Perhaps you are not survivors, only creatures who refuse to die, no matter how many others burn with you. Gasps filled the hall. Even the other professors glanced at each other nervously, but Orion did not flinch. He took a slow breath, his voice low and even. You think survival is selfish, Professor, he said. Because you've never needed it, Zelyar blinked. Never needed it? Orion nodded. Your worlds were born in peace. Your species learned comfort before struggle. You studied danger through glass screens and simulations, but humanity didn't have that choice. He stepped closer, and the air seemed to grow heavier. When our skies fell, we didn't wait for help. When our oceans boiled, we didn't pray for rescue. We built, we fought, we endured. The professor's voice wavered slightly. And at what cost? Orion's eyes darkened. At every cost, he said. And we'd pay it again. The silence that followed was like gravity, thick, crushing, endless. Finally, Orion spoke again, softer now, almost sorrowful. You think we are monsters because we learned to survive when others wouldn't, he said. But what you call dangerous, we call human. He turned toward the crowd, his voice growing stronger. Every race here thinks extinction is impossible, but every galaxy burns in time, and when it does, you'll need monsters like us. The professor's breath caught in his throat. His mind wanted to argue, but his heart knew the truth. Humanity's survival had not been luck or cruelty. It had been purpose. Orion turned back toward the projection console. Do you want to know why we never stopped? He asked quietly. He activated the holo again, and the hall filled with new images. Not fire this time, but light, humans building cities on dead worlds, planting green and red soil, saving alien species that had gone extinct on their own worlds. For every world we destroyed, he said, we built 10 more for every life we lost. We saved another somewhere else. He looked directly at Zelyar. That's what extinction taught us, to value every breath. The professor stared at the images, speechless. The other cadets sat frozen, caught between awe and shame. Finally, Zelyar whispered, and what if survival no longer needs you? What if peace lasts forever? Orion smiled faintly. Then we'll guard it quietly, he said, until it breaks again. He turned to leave but stopped at the steps and looked back. Don't mistake fire for hate, Professor, he said softly. It burns because it remembers the cold. The hall was silent as he walked out. For a long moment, no one moved. Then Professor Zelyar turned off the holo and faced the class. His voice trembled slightly as he said, Lesson dismissed. That night, Zelyar sat in his quarters alone, the stars beyond his window reflecting in his eyes. He finally understood something no book could ever teach. Humanity was not dangerous because it destroyed. It was dangerous because it refused to die. And somewhere deep in his mind, one thought refused to fade. If extinction shaped them, what will they become when the next one arrives? The cadet's revelation. The next day, the skies above Virelia Prime were covered in a strange shimmer. Invisible ripples moved through the upper atmosphere, like waves in water that had no sea inside the academy. The halls buzzed with nervous energy. Rumors spread that the professor had reported Cadet Orion to the Council of Education for spreading fear and false history. But when the morning bell rang, every cadet came to class anyway. Something in them wanted to hear what the human would say next. Professor Zelyar entered late, his face unreadable. He walked straight to the podium and said nothing for a long moment. Then with quiet authority he spoke. Yesterday, I challenged humanity's nature, he said, and last night, I received a transmission that changed everything. The room fell silent. He turned toward Orion. Cadet Orion stepped forward. Orion rose without hesitation, his boots echoing against the smooth floor. He stopped beside the professor, calm as always. Do you know what this message means? Zelyar asked, showing a small holographic data crystal. Orion nodded slowly. It means they finally decided to answer. The professor hesitated. They? Orion looked out at the crowd. Earth, he said simply. A ripple of shock ran through the students. The homeworld? Someone whispered. But Earth is lost. No signals have ever. Orion raised a hand, silencing them. It was never lost, he said. It was silent. He stepped forward, activating the data crystal. The room darkened as a giant hologram appeared above them. A fleet, black and vast, moving through a sea of stars. Each ship bore the emblem of the Terran Eagle. Wings spread over a burning sun. Gasps filled the hall. Professor Zelyar whispered. Impossible. Orion's voice was steady. The Terran fleet never died, he said. We hid it, kept it sleeping in the void, waiting for the day extinction would come again. The hologram zoomed in on one colossal ship. Its hull marked Nemesis 2, its weapons glowing faintly blue. This is what humanity learned after the last fall, Orion continued. We do not wait for disaster. We prepare for it. The aliens watched in awe as thousands of smaller ships formed perfect patterns around the flagship. They moved with precision that looked alive, as if every vessel shared one mind. Professor Zelyar's voice trembled. You're saying, this fleet still exists? Orion nodded. Yes, and it listens. He pointed toward the ceiling, toward the stars beyond. When the galaxy burns again, and it will, this armada will rise. The cadets whispered in disbelief. Why hide such power? One asked. You could have ruled the galaxy. Orion looked at him. Because we learned ruling is not surviving, he paused, letting the words sink in. Every empire that sought control fell, but those who built to endure, they became legend. The professor took a step closer, his tone softer now. You kept all of this secret. Even from the council, why reveal it now? Orion turned to face him fully, his eyes reflecting the fleet's ghostly light. Because the signals have started again, he said. A cold murmur filled the hall. What signals? The professor asked. The same kind that came before the last swarm, Orion said quietly. The same tremors in subspace, the same pattern of silence before death. He changed the hologram again, showing faint waves of distortion spreading from the edge of the galaxy. Each pulse looked harmless, but the readings beside them told another story. Collapsing stars, missing colonies, energy drained from entire sectors. The audience stared, fear spreading across their faces. The council won't listen, Orion said. They'll call it anomaly. They always do. The professor felt the weight of his own arrogance pressing on him. He had spent his life believing knowledge was safety. But now, looking at those dark pulses, he realized how fragile they all were. What do you plan to do? He asked. Orion's answer was simple. Remember. He turned off the hologram and faced the class, his voice strong but calm. You think I came here to prove humanity's strength, he said. But that's not true. I came here to remind you that peace is the most dangerous illusion in the universe. He looked around the hall, meeting the eyes of every cadet. When the next extinction comes, you won't have time to study it and you'll have to survive it. No one spoke. No one laughed. The professor's throat tightened as he asked, And if it comes sooner than we think? Orion smiled faintly. Then Earth will wake. The lights brightened again, but the mood did not lift. Outside the Academy's windows, the shimmer in the sky deepened, faint glows twisting like veins of light. The professor stared upward, whispering to himself. We thought extinction was ancient history. Orion's voice came from behind him, calm but chilling. For us, Professor, history never ends, it just waits for the next chapter. Later that night, alone in his office, Zelyar replayed the data crystal again. The fleet hung silent in the void, thousands of warships asleep under human command. And at the end of the message, a single phrase appeared in human script. Transmission acknowledged. Stand by for activation. He leaned back, his tendrils trembling. Somewhere beyond the rim, the void pulsed again. And the professor finally understood why humanity feared nothing, because even extinction was just a rehearsal. The rising silence. The night over Varelia Prime was unnaturally still. The twin moons hung above the Academy like pale eyes, watching, waiting down below in the glass halls. Every monitor flickered with static. No wind, no hum of power, just a long electric hush that felt alive. Professor Zelyar sat at his desk, staring at the dark screen. He hadn't slept since the Human Cadet's revelation. The image of the hidden Terran fleet haunted him, those colossal ships resting in the dark. But what frightened him most was not the fleet. It was the possibility that humanity was right again. Outside, the stars began to fade one by one. At first, he thought it was cloud cover. Then he realized the darkness was spreading through the sky itself, a ripple of black swallowing starlight. moving toward the planet like a shadow with purpose. The alarms broke the silence, a sound that hadn't been heard in centuries. The Academy had never prepared for this. No one ever thought the galaxy's most secure world could know fear. "Subspace distortion detected," called the automated voice. "Unknown energy field expanding at exponential rate." The professor ran to the observation deck, his heart pounding. Cadets and officers gathered there too, pointing at the heavens, whispering. And then, they saw it, the sky twisting, folding inward like a wound reopening. A single blue star blinked and vanished. Then another and another. The room filled with gasps and cries. "It's eating the light," someone said. "No," whispered Zellier, "it's feeding." He turned sharply. "Where is Cadet Orion?" No one knew, but far below, in the lower hangars of the Academy, Orion was already moving. He ran through corridors of trembling glass, his boots echoing like thunder. Every console he passed blinked with warning symbols, red sigils and ancient human code. When he reached the comms chamber, he didn't hesitate. He placed his palm on the control node. The system recognized his DNA. "Terran command authorization detected," it said. "Awaiting confirmation." Orion's voice was steady. "This is Cadet Orion of Earth descent. Initiating Terran Protocol Sigma 2. The entire room lit up. The holograms bursting to life in orbit around distant worlds. Hidden human satellites awoke from their centuries of silence one by one. They sent bursts of data through quantum relays, beacons that had not glowed since the last Galactic War. From the moons of Europa to the red storms of Titan, across Mars, Luna, and forgotten colonies buried in dust, the Terran fleet began to stir. Back in the observation deck, the professor stared as a transmission filled the screens. A single voice spoke through static, cold and clear. "This is Earth Command," it said. "Signal received. Stand by for contact." The crowd froze. The professor's throat went dry. "It's real," he whispered. "They're awake." The darkness outside the window thickened. Then from its depths something emerged, enormous, alive, moving like smoke-given flesh. It wasn't a fleet, it wasn't a storm, it was something older, something born from the same black that once created stars. The sensors screamed, unable to define it. "All readings unstable," shouted a cadet. "We can't scan it." The professor looked at it and felt his heart freeze. "This isn't the swarm," he said slowly. "It's something worse." Orion's voice came through the speakers. "Everyone listen carefully," he said. "Get the shields up and keep your comms clear." "They're listening." "Who's listening?" demanded a captain. Orion didn't answer. He stood alone in the control room, the holographic map of the galaxy glowing before him. Half the outer sectors were dark. Cut off completely, the void was spreading. On the largest monitor, a new signal appeared, a human encryption. It pulsed 3 times, slow and deliberate. Then words appeared across the screen. Transmission confirmed, Terran fleet mobilizing. For a moment, the professor forgot to breathe. He turned to the other cadets. "Do you understand what this means?" They looked at him blankly. "It means humanity just took command of the galaxy again," he whispered. Outside, the first Terran ship broke through hyperspace above the planet. It was colossal, shaped like a blade of black steel, its engines burning bright as suns. On its side glowed ancient letters, Nemesis II. The ship's arrival tore the sky apart, scattering clouds like dust. Its shadow covered the Academy in darkness. Inside the ship, thousands of crew awoke from cryosleep. AI cores hummed, reactors flared, and deep in the heart of the vessel, Earth's old flag unfurled once more. The voice of Admiral Celine Ward echoed through every speaker. "This is Earth Command to all colonies," she said. "The silence has begun. Prepare for engagement. On Virelia Prime." Professor Zellier fell to his knees, staring at the monstrous ship in awe for the first time. He understood what Orion had meant. Humanity did not wait for extinction. It hunted it. And now extinction itself had something to fear. As the Nemesis II turned its weapons toward the dark horizon, the black ripples in space quivered, retreating slightly, as if the void itself remembered an old enemy. And Orion's voice whispered through the comms, calm and cold. "Extinction has come again." "Professor," he said, "but this time it's not coming for us." The legend of humanity, the sky of Virelia Prime burned with light. The Nemesis II hung above the world like a black sun, its engines thundering softly through the thin clouds. Below, cities shook as the Terran fleet spread across orbit, forming a shimmering wall of silver and fire. No alien fleet had ever moved with such precision. No command had ever sounded so calm in the face of doom. Professor Zellier stood on the balcony of the academy, his golden eyes wide, his mind torn between terror and wonder. He watched hundreds of human ships cut through the dark void, their hulls glowing with runes older than most civilizations alive today. Every weapon glowed like a star reborn. Every formation moved like a heartbeat, steady, certain, unstoppable. Then the void opened again. A rift the size of a continent tore across space, black tendrils spilling outward, twisting reality like cloth. The silence that followed was unbearable. No birds, no wind, no sound. Then the voice of Admiral Celine Ward echoed through every channel. "This is Earth Command," she said. "Engage." The first volley came from the dreadnoughts. Lances of pure white energy speared through the rift, burning through the tendrils and lighting up the darkness. The entire planet saw it. Beams brighter than day, shadows of giants fighting gods. Humanity had once feared the void. Now the void feared them. In the control deck of the Nemesis II, Orion stood beside the Admiral, his uniform still marked with the insignia of the Academy, a reminder that he was both student and soldier. "Status?" Celine asked. "Shields at full," Orion replied. "Enemy mass forming at Vector 7-3. The Admiral nodded slowly, her eyes narrowing. "Let them come," she said. Outside, the darkness took shape, enormous serpentine forms made of energy and shadow, the same creatures that had devoured 1,000 galaxies before the Council even existed. They screamed across space, striking at the human fleet with claws of gravity and fire. But the humans did not retreat, they advanced. The Nemesis II moved like a living mountain, its broadside cannons igniting in sequence. Every blast ripped holes through the blackness, and the void shrieked in pain. The professor, watching from below, trembled as the air cracked with thunder. He whispered to no one, "They are fighting extinction itself," and he was right. For every ship that fell, 3 more took its place. For every scream from the void, the humans answered with silence. The silence of focus, the silence of resolve. The battle raged for hours, then days, until the sky was nothing but light and darkness locked together. Finally the order came. "Prepare the Sunbreaker," Celine commanded. Orion looked at her. "Are you sure?" "The blast could erase everything within 1,000 leagues." Celine's voice did not waver. "If we fail, there will be nothing left to save." Deep inside the Nemesis, the Sunbreaker core began to awaken, a miniature star forged by human hands glowing with endless power. The Admiral placed her hand on the console. "For Earth," she said. Orion echoed softly. "For everyone," the star ignited, a burst of light so pure it drowned the heavens. The rift collapsed inward, the black tendrils vaporized, and the darkness screamed before dissolving into dust. The blast spread through the system, cleansing it in one final surge of blinding brilliance. Then came silence again. The void was empty, peaceful. The humans had done what no one else could. They had ended extinction itself. On the surface of Verelia Prime, survivors stepped out of shelters and gazed upward. The sky shimmered with golden light, the stars brighter than ever before. And though no one could see the Terran fleet clearly, they felt its presence when like a heartbeat in the cosmos. The galaxy was alive again. Professor Zellier stood in the Academy courtyard, the wind moving softly through the broken glass around him. He saw Orion walk toward him, his uniform torn, his face calm. "Is it over?" Zellier asked. "For now," Orion said. "But endings never last." He looked at the horizon where the sky still glowed faintly. "Extinction always returns, Professor," he said. "That's why we never sleep." The professor bowed his head slightly. "I was wrong about your people," he said. "I thought survival made you cruel, but it made you guardians." Orion smiled faintly. "We learned that strength without mercy is just another kind of death." Above them, the Nemesis II hovered silently, its engines pulsing like a distant heartbeat. The fleet began to ascend. One by one, the ships vanished into hyperspace. They left behind no monuments, no demands, no glory, only safety. And in that moment, the galaxy understood what humans truly were. Not conquerors, not monsters, but memory given form. Years later, statues would rise across 1,000 worlds, not of heroes or generals, but of a single human cadet standing in a hall, defying laughter with truth, and beneath every monument, the same words would be carved in every tongue. When all hope is lost, look to Earth. The professor grew old. His scales faded, his hands trembling, but every year he returned to the courtyard at dawn to watch the sunrise. Sometimes, when the light hit the clouds just right, he thought he could see the shadow of a ship moving silently across the stars, and each time he whispered the same words. Earth remembers somewhere. Beyond the edge of the known universe, the Terran fleet drifted quietly. Its lights dim, its weapons sleeping once more. But deep in the command core, a single signal pulsed again, soft and steady. Monitoring complete, it said, awaiting the next call. And in that endless silence, humanity kept watch, because they knew what the galaxy had finally learned. Extinction is not the end. It is the reason humanity rises again and again,